Hey guys, the Unsmooth Criminal here, and this is gonna be what if Deku was in love with the number one villain or a demon. So, we start off, this is gonna be in the perspective of Izuku as the first episode, but the second episode is gonna be in the perspective of his girlfriend. But we start off with a 4-year-old Izuku learning that he has a villainous quirk. Most people are gonna be wanting him to be quirkless, but I'm gonna give him a villainous quirk. So his quirk is the ability to make people see stuff if they look into his eyes. It's called the eyes of a devil, or the eyes of the demon god. But he has the ability to clone himself multiple times, up to 6 times, and he can see through all the eyes and control the bodies like he normally does for his normal body. If anybody knows what these eyes are, put it in comments and I'll give you 10 billion points that do absolutely nothing. But he can see through stuff. He can do whatever these eyes from another anime could do, and he has the abilities of the other levels. And he goes to school, and his eyes hurt one day, and his eyes slowly are changing. They turn red, and then he goes home, and his mother sees this and takes him to the quirk doctor. The quirk doctor tells him that he has a quirk, but it's a very villainous quirk, and it could hurt people if he's not careful. And he starts getting sad that he couldn't be a hero. But this doctor, who was a hero at one point, has a villainous quirk saying, you could be a hero, just it may take a little bit of time to control and show people that you are able to be a hero. So he starts to get a little happier, and this smile carries on to the next day, and this little girl that's roughly his age, a little younger though, maybe a few days younger, sees this smile and gets addicted to it. And she has 2 quirks. And one is a self-destructive quirk that is the downside to her original quirk, and her original quirk is called Demon Queen. She can do whatever a demon can do, and she has no emotion of right or wrong. And her second quirk is overly obsessed. If anybody knows what a yandere is, there we go. So she gets obsessed with this one item or person, and this item or person, if they don't like them back, they will blow up and start going crazy. And there's pretty much no way to stop them, because if they blow up and go crazy, it's 10 times harder to stop them because they don't feel pain. They lose their mind and start attacking anybody. So it's the first day of school where Izuku's wearing a blindfold, and everybody asks him why he's wearing a blindfold, and Izuku says that he can't control his quirk yet, and that he can still see, but the blindfold helps minimize his quirk. So everybody's like, he may just be acting like he has a quirk. So Bakugo walks up to Izuku and says, Izuku, your quirk is probably not as cool as mine. And he goes, it isn't. Sadly, it isn't. But I still wish to be your friend, Kachan. And he goes, damn Deku. And he still calls him useless because the next 2 years, he doesn't activate his quirk at school. He doesn't even show his eyes at school. And everybody's getting suspicious that he doesn't even have a quirk. So one day, this girl walks behind Izuku, and Izuku feels a presence behind him that he's felt before, but can't place it. So he turns around and sees this little girl and almost bumped into her, and he said sorry for bumping into her, but he never did. And she said it's fine, and she'd like to be his friend. And so they start being friends, and this girl's name is Yui. So Izuku one day says, why don't you come to my house so we could play and get to know each other better? And she immediately jumps in saying yes. And her parents, who know she has this absolute obsession quirk, goes, if we find out what her obsession is with, we can help calm this obsession down. And so they find out that she's going on a play date with a friend at school, and they're like, can we come with so we can meet their parents? And she says sure. So her parents meet Inko and they talk, and Izuku's currently outside with Yui, and Yui's parents says, Miss Midoriya, we're sorry about this, but we have some bad news to tell you. And she goes, okay, what is it? And she's starting to get worried for Izuku and Yui, and they say that Yui has a very self-destructive quirk that if she gets attached to something, there's a chance that she could go boom and destroy everything around her. And Inko says, okay, is there any way I can help? And Izuku can help. And they go, yeah, we need help toning down the levels of obsession, because without controlling the quirk, your son, you, us, even All Might, and they show a picture of what someone with a similar quirk did, a weaker but similar quirk did, to All Might. That's how he got the gut injury. And she looks at this and is like, oh my god. And they go, this is a stronger version of the quirk that did that. So we skip. So they're 10 years. They're just getting into high school. Izuku's gotten closer to Yui, and Yui's gotten closer to Izuku. And at this point, Bakugo just bullies Deku constantly. And this random girl joins their high school and starts getting close to Izuku, and Izuku is okay with this a little. But he still feels more uncomfortable with this random girl, Ochako Uraraka, compared to Yui. And Yui doesn't see this. She just sees competition. But Uraraka sees this and is like, okay, he doesn't like me very much. I just want to be friends, so maybe later we could be friends and hopefully get along. But in the back of Yui's mind, it's, she's going to take my Izuku. She's going to take my Izuku. So she's going a little bonkers, and there's been many occasions where there's these mangled, just destroyed corpses of kids, and the only connection is that they know they bullied one kid in school. And everybody's like, where the hell is this villain coming from? And one day, Eraserhead was on patrol near this school, and he saw this demon. You see the picture of the demon walking around and stalking a kid that is walking away. And he looks and watches and waits, and this demon attacks this kid and just completely and utterly beats him to a bloody pulp and just leaves him there. And the entire time while she's beating this kid is, don't touch my Izuku. That's all she said. So Aizawa's like, who the hell is Izuku? And so he looks into the kid's background and sees that he's been bullying this kid named Izuku Midoriya. So Aizawa goes to the household of Izuku Midoriya, Inko Midoriya, and asks to talk with Izuku. And so Izuku, seeing Eraserhead, and Eraserhead being one of his favorite heroes, jumps up in joy and says that he's one of his favorite heroes and that he wishes to be like him one day. And Eraserhead smiles at this, saying, okay, maybe one day you can get into UA. And Izuku goes, I'm definitely getting in. And Eraserhead starts to chuckle a little, going, okay, now serious. Did you know this kid? And he shows a picture of the kid before he got beaten to a bloody pulp and almost died. And Izuku says, yeah, that's one of the bullies at my school. And Aizawa says, I know, I've seen that on his record. but do you know this woman? And shows the picture of the demon, and he goes, no. And he looks a little closer and says, wait, that's Yui's hair. And Aizawa says, who's Yui? And he goes, my friend from school. She has white hair like that too. But she has somewhat different white hair. And he goes, how different? And Izuku says, the very ends are blue of her hair. That's completely white, so it might not even be Yui. And Aizawa says, thank you for your time. I'm going to check something out. And he leaves. And Izuku, wanting to continue to talk with Aizawa, makes a clone of himself and runs out of the house really quickly and says, wait, hold on. And hands Aizawa a phone number and says, can I call you sometime? And Aizawa says, sure, I'll call you and if I get any more information about your friend to see if there's anything that you need to be worried about. And he starts looking a little worried and says, okay, thank you. And Aizawa goes to Yui's house, and Yui sees that it's Aizawa, and he's like, ooh, it's Izuku's favorite hero. One of Izuku's favorite heroes. And she starts talking to Aizawa, like, did you talk to Izuku? And he goes, you mean Izuku Midoriya? And she goes, yeah. He goes, yeah? He's a really nice kid. Hope that he gets into UA. And he says, can I talk to your parents? And she goes, sure. She leads him over to her parents, and she leaves the room and starts texting Izuku to see what they talked about. And Izuku, not lying to anybody, says that he was wondering what you looked like because you were my only friend in school, and that there may have been a chance that you were the person behind all these beatings to these kids and maybe killed a few kids. And she's like, oh God, I can't let him know. So she goes, what? I can't hurt a soul. I'm just like you. And he starts to laugh in real life and says, yeah, you are. You've never hurt anybody when around me. So I don't believe that for a second. And she starts to calm down a little, and Aizawa's talking to her parents and asking what are her quirks, what is her quirk, and her parents look at each other and say, the string of kids being violently assaulted are from her, and we've calmed her violent tendencies down tenfold from what it was originally. And Aizawa says, what do you mean? And they look down and say that, remember the wound that All Might got from that one out of control quirk? And he goes, yeah. They say, she has a stronger version. And he looks at them and says, so I'm guessing Izuku Midoriya is the trigger? And they look at him and go, yeah, he is. And Aizawa goes, okay, so I'm definitely getting them into UA now, and they will forever be part of my class. So when they are going to college or applying to college, you must make her go to UA. And they say, she goes wherever Izuku goes. So if you get him in, she's going. No matter what. Even if you kick her out of school, she will go. And he goes, okay, makes sense. But does Izuku know? And they go, no, he does not. We keep telling her that she needs to tell him that she has another quirk. And she says no, that her demon quirk is enough for him to know. And so we've been trying, and she just keeps refusing. He goes, okay, I understand. I have a adoptive son like that doesn't like his villainous quirk. And they say, do you know what Izuku Midoriya's quirk is? And he goes, no, I have not looked up what his quirk is. They say he has a villainous quirk too. He has the eyes of the demon god. And Aizawa goes, what do you mean demon god? And they say there's a legend of a 10-tailed creature called the Jubi that had one eye, and it looked red, circles, and had Tomoe in it. And he has two of them. And Aizawa says, oh, Oh, okay. I understand now. So it's... So now, Yeah, let's skip another few years. So we skip to the last day of uh, high school, where Izuku is walking home and Yui's right next to him. At this point, they are neighbors because Izuku moved next to Yui because he needed to live a little closer to the high school. So Yui is walking home with Izuku, and the sludge villain attacks, and Yui instinctively jumped in front of Izuku and changed into her demon form to protect him. And he saw this demon form and asked, after the sludge villain was captured by one of her abilities, is she the one that has been attacking the students? And she looks down and says, yeah. And he goes, why? And she goes, because they hurt you. And he goes, I'm fine. They're just picking on me because they don't like me and my quirk. So he just hugs her and she calms down. And he says that there's no one ever able to take you away from me. Because he knows her feelings, because with the eyes he can see someone's true feelings and thoughts. So he slowly calms her down, and All Might shows up, and the sludge villain is currently in a bubble. Literally in a bubble. And he can't get out, and All Might says, I'm here and unneeded. And Yui says, yeah. And she throws the bubble to All Might, says, don't drop it. And he goes, I won't. And he puts it under his arm because it's too big to fit in his pocket. And he jumps off. And they walk home. They get home. And so Midoriya's, Yui's family have 2 apartments. And there's an apartment in between them for Izuku and Yui. So they basically live alone. So Izuku is talking to Yui while they walk into their home, and they walk in and they see Eraserhead, and he says, it's time for the 2-week training before you join my class. And they go, and Izuku goes, what do you mean join your class? And he goes, I've made a proposition with Nezu, and it concerns you, Midoriya. And he points at Yui and says, it also concerns you, but not as much. And he looks at Midoriya and says, if you can get in through the entrance exams in 2 weeks, you and Yui, and he points at Yui, get into my class, and you will be unable to be expelled by any teacher or anybody in school. And Izuku looks at him with wide eyes, but he can't see it through the blindfold. He says, thank you! Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And he starts jumping up and down, hugging Yui, and they both are happy. And Aizawa sees this and starts to laugh a little, being like, children are children. So he skipped the 2 weeks. Izuku was training his butt off, and he learned a little bit of swordplay and a little bit of bow. He learned a little bit of bow staffs, nunchucks, fist fighting, spearmanship. He learned how to use tonfas. He learned how to use every weapon. He did it really easily. So he walks into the area, and they said that, sorry, but you have to show your quirk off to get in. And he says, fine. So he takes his blindfold off just a tiny bit to show the bottom of his eyes, because he says that I have a very bad issue of making people fall asleep with my eyes if I show them my entire eye. And they go, okay. And they look carefully, and they see just the bottom part of his eyes, and it's red with circles in it. And they go, okay, you have a quirk, and your quirk matches what it says here. And they show him a picture, and he goes, ooh, that's a good design. when was that taken? And they go, when Aizawa stopped by 2 weeks ago. You fell asleep. Aizawa came in and took a picture of your eye while you were asleep. And then left. And he goes, oh, that's why I woke up randomly. Okay. And Yui's behind him, and she's like, you got this. And she was told to wait in the observation room, because she's not able to see him at all. And she asks, why can't she see Izuku? And Nezu walks in saying, I've known what your quirk is since middle school, and I'm here to give you a proposition. And she says, what is it? And the entire time while Izuku's taking the practical test, Izumi's listening to Nezu's proposition. So Izuku, who's there, saves Ochako, and Ochako develops somewhat of a crush on him. That's going to come in later. And they end, and he walks into the observation room and sees Yui and Nezu saying, do we have a deal? And Yui saying yes. And Izuku walking up to Yui, hugging her from behind, saying, so what's the deal? And she said, I said yes, and that's all I'm going to say. And Nezu says, thank you, and I'll give your scores out tomorrow. The next day, it's a weekend, and they get the letter in the mail, and it says, congratulations, you have passed. He got a higher score. He got the top score in the entrance exams. Because A, he's not nervous, and B, he used his eyes to just crush all of them because he had gravity manipulation. Duh. So he crushed them, and he got a lot of points. Then he saved Ochako, which gave him even more points. So he had roughly 200-ish points, just below All Might's score, but definitely beating Eraserhead's score. So it's time for the first day, and Izuku gets up, gets dressed, and Yui walks out of her room, which is next to Izuku's, because they were told not to be in the same room until they're 18, and Izuku's 17. Yui's definitely 17, because she's younger. So Izuku says, today's the day, and she goes, yeah. They eat breakfast, they go to school. First day of UA, and Aizawa says, okay, all you problem children, it's time for class. And then he says, it's 5 minutes after your class, and you still haven't shut up, so you all have a test now. And takes them out, and he says, Izuku Midoriya, you got first on the entrance exams, you throw the ball. He tosses Izuku the ball, and the ball stops in midair. And he says, yes, sir. He takes his blindfold off finally and says, I have my full power when I do this. And he puts it around his neck, and he just walks to the circle. And without taking his hands out of his pockets, because his blindfold came off automatically, he threw the ball. It didn't stop breaking the sound barrier until it was out of orbit. And it said infinite, so he put his blindfold back on and walked to Yui and hugged her and stood behind her. And she never had to take the test because of the deal Nezu made. So it's now the Heroes vs. Villains a week later, and All Might runs in saying, I am here, walking through the door like a normal person. And Izuku, being somewhat of a jokester in this one, because he had his courage built up by Yui, tripped All Might slightly. So he stumbled when he entered the room. And Bakugo started laughing. And he's like the number one hero at Klutz. That's going to be hilarious for the media to find out. And he goes, please ignore that. You can't be a hero without having a costume. And he presses the buttons and the costumes come out. Yui goes into her demon form and walks out immediately. And Izuku he wants to pull out an anime trope. So he walks out in some captain robes and with a giant freaking sword. And his hair is a little longer in this one, so he pulled off the Kenpachi look quite well. But then he changed to what he actually is going to wear. And he put on the Kakashi-style face mask and the Anbu mask. And he said, okay, I'm actually going to be wearing this. I'm not going to be wearing that. And they all look at him like he was crazy before he changed. And they go, oh, makes sense now. So it's... And Yui's supposed to be sitting out because it's a 21 size class in this one. So Yui sits out for most activities. And they're asking why is Yui sitting out for most activities. And they, All Might says personal reasons and quirk reasons. And they go, what are her quirks? She never told us. That's when we introduced ourselves. And he goes, that is confidential. I cannot say. When she says, she will release it. And she's put in a room that has no cameras. And Izuku's match is first. It's Izuku, Uraraka, Bakugo, and Ida again. And Bakugo, wanting to prove that the Deku from his old school, who had a quirk the entire time, is still useless. So he walks out to Deku, and he currently has the folding bow staff, the folding sword from Dishonored, the pistol with rubber bullets, like Snipe does, and the Tonfa, the Doomslayer kind of Tonfa, where it comes out of his gauntlets on his wrists. It's still useless. So he pulls out the Tonfa by jerking his hands, and it shoots out of his gauntlets, and he gets in a fighting stance, and Bakugo comes near him and is like, okay, you useless Deku. And his mask, his eyelids that had shades on them, slowly open, and this pressure is felt by Bakugo, and he starts to stutter and goes, Deku, you are still useless. And he's just constantly belittling Deku. And Deku's like, oh really? Bakugo. And he spits the name Bakugo because he's not friends with Bakugo anymore. And Bakugo, hearing his name being spit out like a snake's venom, is like, what is wrong with him? He used to be nice and helped everybody. But then he thinks back of what he did to Deku, and he's like, this kind of makes sense a little. And they start fighting, and he tells Uraraka to go because Bakugo's going to stay here and fight him. So everything pretty much happens to canon, except for the punch to the sky, which helps Uraraka win. Instead, it's Bakugo flying to the sky because of gravity release. So he flies up through the floor, and Uraraka wins that way, and Bakugo's out like a light. And Izuku has no broken bones, no burns, no nothing for damage on him. And this pissed off Bakugo. And yes, by this time, Izuku has bleached his hair to white so he can match Yui's, because he has feelings for Yui, and he doesn't show it because he doesn't need to. So we skip to a few days later when Yui and Izuku are at home, and he says it's finally done. All the boxes are packed up, and Inko walks in saying your mail is here and hands him the letter, and Izuku sees it's from UA, and he goes, oh, so it's finally done. And Inko hugs him saying, you're going to be gone? And he goes, I'm sorry, Mom, but they've made a deal with us, and we must stay on campus until school is over. And so Inko's like, okay, let's have one last dinner together. And they go, sure. And Izuku used his eyes to put them in a pocket dimension all his items and Yui's items. And so they walk to Izuku's old home. Yui's old home. They walk in and they see a giant feast, and one bowl that's separate has katsudon in it. And then Yui's is pizza. And Inko's is another Japanese dish, and they look at this and go, "You spent how long on this stuff?" And they go, "Well, Yui likes homemade pizza, so we thought, while we're waiting for the dough to rise and for the dough to actually be mixed properly, we should make everybody else their favorite dish." And Yui looks at her mom and dad and says, "Thank you," hugs them, and goes back to the seat next to Izuku and sits down. And Yui at this point has been stealing money from banks without them noticing. She's been killing heroes that are trying to take advantage of people with villainous quirks because they get too close to Izuku. These banks are not treating Izuku's mother fairly, and she's been doing all this criminal action without anybody noticing. And her villain name, because she's been known all across the world at this point, because she would go overseas to steal money, so it's not traceable. Her villain name at this point is the Invisible Woman. No, the Invisible Demon. Yeah, the Invisible Demon. Because when you shine a light on her while she's invisible, you could still see her outline. And they see the image of a demon. But they can't hit her while she's invisible. And they can't see her while she's invisible, except for the outline in the light. So she's known all across the world for murders. She's wanted for murders. She's wanted for theft of billions and billions of USD, US currency, and the murder of one of the old number one heroes, because this number one hero was just retiring because she was at the end of her time span, and she accidentally said something wrong to one of the little children in an orphanage. And that was when Izuku and her were on a field trip during their elementary school to see how bad these slums are. And she accidentally said, "It's going to be hard and sometimes not even able to be a hero with a villainous quirk." And the children took it the wrong way, and Izuku started to tear up a little, and she got pissed off and killed Nana Shimura. But it looked like All For One did. So All For One is still being blamed by All Might. So Yui is in this room, and she's trying to meditate and keep a mental link with Izuku, but Izuku uses his eyes to cancel a mental link while they're working. And Yui, who is getting a little mad at this, starts to freak out, but she's told by a teacher that's in the room to calm down, and if you calm down, you could see him faster. And so she starts calming down, and a few seconds later, Izuku runs in the room and says, "I did it! I won!" And she jumps up and looks at him and says, "Yay!" and runs over, and they start hugging and having a good time. And they walk to the observation room, and she's checking over him for injuries, and he's like, I'm fine. You know, any injury I take is actually healed by my eyes, right? And she goes, I know. And yes, he does have that scar over his left eye because someone took a knife to his eye, but his eye healed because the demon god's eyes, duh. So he has the Rene Sharingan, if anybody was wondering. So while he's sleeping, the Rene Sharingan is deactivated into the Renegon, but when he's awake, it's constantly the Rene Sharingan, and it's constantly draining energy. So, yeah. And one day, he's walking into class, and he has, instead of a blindfold, he has goggles on, and it looks like the goggle, the Gato goggles. The Gato goggles, or tanning bed goggles at the same time. The tanning bed goggles, where it's just covering enough for the eyeball so no one can see his eyeballs, and they're just staying there, like they're built into his skin. And everybody asks, why does he have weird goggles on? And he says, every time I look someone in the eyes with my actual eyes, they fall asleep. And he finally shows people his eyes without people looking directly, without him looking directly in his eyes, because he's looking up at one of the corners of the room. And he says that I can see everything and I know everything when I have my eyes uncovered. And then he flicks Mineta in the forehead and says, stop. And he looks pissed off, and he looks at Mineta directly in the eyes. Mineta can't help but look into his eyes, and he goes, burn. And Mineta thinks he's being burnt alive, and he starts screaming. And Yui says, what was he thinking? And he goes, I don't think you want to know. So Yui goes, okay. And so they go to class. Class is about to start, so he stops. He torture on Mineta, and Mineta falls to the ground, dying of pain. And he's like, oh god, he's a monster. And Bakugo, who finally walks in, awake and late, says, no duh, he's a monster. And he sits in his seat, and he just goes, whatever, extras. And a few months pass, because no. Later that day, this is the next day after the dinner. Later that day, Izuku is told he can go to lunch, or he can go to his dorm. And everybody hears that he has a dorm, and they ask, why does he get a dorm on UA? And they say, there's a special condition for Izuku staying at UA and Yui staying at UA in my class for them to get a dorm room, because their quirks are very unstable compared to yours. And he points at Bakugo. Yours is very stable because you can turn it on and off. He looks at Midoriya and says, yours is unstable because you can't turn it off yet. Then he looks at Yui and says, yours is just yours. And he just walks away and just leaves the room. And Izuku picks up Yui, and all of a sudden they look like they're getting warped into a black void. And then this swirl appears in front of the dorm with Powerloader wondering when Izuku's going to arrive. And this swirl appears, and he starts freaking out, like, what's happening? And Izuku shows up with Yui in his arms, bridal style, and he drops Yui, and Yui says that is very disorienting, and he goes, yeah, I still can't control it very well. So if you start having a hard time eating, I need to warp you back into the dimension, then warp you out. She goes, okay, and they walk into the dorms, and Powerloader sees them walk in and says, finally, the people I've been waiting for. And he explains what the conditions of the storm are and how strong it's been built. And Yui hears this and says, is this all for me? And Izuku looks at her and goes, no, this is for us. And she looks at him and goes, oh, yeah. If you want to see the Rene Sharingan looks like that, but just red. And another layer of Tomoe on the outside. What image should I put up now? I know what image. This one. So Izuku takes off his shirt and he shows his abs and he shows the tattoos that he inscribed onto himself. And it looks like Sukuna. Yes, he looks like Sukuna. And the tattoos on his face aren't there yet, but he says to Yui that he wants her to tattoo him on his face. And he shows her the patterns and she goes, is this gonna hurt? And he goes, oh no, it's not. Once you tattoo my face, it's gonna look so much cooler. And she goes, really? And he goes, yeah, you'll like it, I promise. And she goes, okay. And so his face gets tattooed and he looks like Sukuna, but his hair is white. So he's a mixture of Kakashi Hatake and Sukuna. Because he's as big as Sukuna and as slick as Kakashi. So he says that now that I'm basically God incarnate, and he points to his eyes. You want to go have some fun? And she goes, yeah. And so they go out for a night on the town, and they stop, with his eyes, they stop 32 assaults. 12 of them were about to be murders, and 5 bank robberies, and they get back to school before midnight, and they lock their doors, and they have fun, because they were waiting for this time to be alone. And Aizawa walks in the morning and sees the mess of clothes, and he goes, I'll be back, and walks out, tells the chef, I forget his name, the chef in the cafeteria, to cook up a large breakfast for 2 very hungry teenagers. And he asks why, and he goes, after what they did last night, they need a lot of nutrients. And he goes, oh, okay. And so he cooks up a lunch, and Nezu basically built them a house on campus, so they live there, and they can do whatever the hell they want there. And Aizawa basically brings a giant pot of this food and places it on the stove, turns on the stove to warm it, and he bangs on the counter saying, everybody get the hell up. And they both get up and run downstairs with clothes on, and Izuku doesn't have a shirt on, and Aizawa being Aizawa and his husband being Mike sees Izuku and gets a bloody nose and goes, I'm gonna leave before I die. And he just walks out, and Yui goes, damn right, you better leave before you die. And Izuku goes, seriously? He's our teacher, you can't kill him. She goes, I know. So 2 months later, they're still settling into UA, and Nezu says that there's been an uproar in the 1A, 1B, and the rest of the students about dorm system and how it's unfair that we treated these two very differently than everybody else. So I've planned to input a dorm next month, so the people who have a hard time getting to school can get to school faster, and the people who have a hard time paying rent outside of school can live here without paying rent. And all the teachers are like, that's a good idea. But what about the 2 lovebirds we have? And Aizawa starts chuckling, going, they're not going to be a problem. They like my class, but they'd prefer to stay in the house that we've given them. And Nezu says, I wasn't planning on moving them. I just was planning on building a dorm right next to their house, so everybody can conversate with them and understand them a bit better, because their quirks are so strong that if we give them no social interaction and they go bonkers, they're gonna destroy everything. And they go, true. And Izuku teleports in with his swirl and says, Nezu, kind of have a problem. And Nezu goes, what is the problem? And he says, Yui kind of went crazy after I accidentally cut myself. And he shows the wound is closing up, and he goes, Aizawa, I kind of need your help. And he grabs Aizawa by the shoulder. Aizawa gets teleported with him. They get to the house, and Yui's going, like, what the hell? Why did you cut yourself? Blah, 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 blah. And she's freaking out that Izuku's going to die. And Aizawa uses his quirk, and she calms down immediately and goes like, "Who was I talking about?" And passes out, and he says, "Thank you, Aizawa." And Aizawa says, "No problem," and he teleports Aizawa back, and Aizawa goes, "So it's okay now." And I calmed her down because her quirk was making her energy levels too high, so she was kind of burning out faster than she actually could and actually could handle. And he goes, "Okay, makes sense." And they go back on their meeting, and they all go, "Do we have a ticking time bomb in our school?" And Nezu goes, "Depending on what we do to Izuku Midoriya, maybe." And they all look at Nezu saying, "What do you mean, depending on what we do to Izuku Midoriya?" And he goes, "If we hurt Izuku Midoriya..." No, actually, screw that. Scratch that. He doesn't have that. He looks like this with his Rene Sharingan. Ooh, Tear Grace. Ooh, new subscriber. Cool. Thanks, dude. Or girl, whatever you are. You could even be a A10 Warhawk. I don't care. New subscriber. Thank you. So, Izuku puts on gloves and he gets his suit on before he gets into class. And he walks into class and he has a big smile on his face. And everybody asks, "What are you so happy about?" And he goes, "We're going to the USJ today." And I'm sad too. And they go, "Why are you sad?" And he goes, "My girlfriend can't come along." And Uraraka, who's had a little crush on him but not able to say it, hears girlfriend, and she goes, "Damn it. I wanted to be there." And Izuku senses this and takes his blindfold off and looks at Uraraka and goes, "Oh, okay." And everybody's like, "USJ, Universal Studios Japan?" And he goes, "Oh, no, 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 no. We don't do that here." And they go, "What do you mean we don't do that here?" And he goes, "Aizawa-sensei, would you like to explain?" And Aizawa, who's currently under his desk, goes, "God damn it, you and your sensing abilities." He goes, "You know you like me as a student." And he goes, "Yeah, I do. I also like Yui. You're my favorite students." And he blatantly says this, and Izuku goes, "Oh, thank you." And he goes, "You're welcome. Now, time to get on the bus." And everybody walks out, gets on the bus, and starts talking to each other. And Izuku gets a little angry because everybody's just talking and talking and talking and talking, and he can't get any sleep. And Aizawa is passed out like he normally does. So it's now time for Izuku to blow up on everybody. So he starts yelling at everybody that they're too loud and that some people, and he points at Aizawa saying, "Some people are trying to sleep and I'm only blowing up on you and being this loud because you guys are being louder than me when I normally talk." And he wasn't even moving his mouth right then. He was talking to them mentally, and everybody started freaking out when they looked at Izuku and he wasn't moving his mouth. And they heard this yelling voice like it was right next to their ears. And they're like, "Sorry, sorry, sorry, we won't talk anymore." And so it's quiet the rest of the way to the USJ. And Izuku, while he's at the USJ, gets a text on his phone and he says, "Aizawa-sensei, I'll be right back." And he swirls away and they walk into the USJ and 13 says, "All quirks can be dangerous," and gives that speech. And they they ask, like Yui's and Izuku's, and 13, who knows who Izuku is but not Yui, because some teachers haven't even met Yui yet, says, "Izuku's, yes, I haven't met this Yui person, but from what I hear, yes, hers is very dangerous." And All Might's there in small, skinny French fry form because everybody knows about it already, and he says yes. And one of the quirks that are similar to young Miss Yui's is the one that gave me this injury. And he pulls up his shirt and shows the injury, and everybody winces at it. And he says that it's very strong and very destructive to the person who wields this quirk. And they ask, "What is the side effect of this quirk?" And he goes, "There is no side effect except for when the person who has this quirk feels a lot of emotional trauma, or the person that they are connected to feels trauma in any way. And they ask, what do you mean? And he says, I can't say any more until she gets here and gives me the okay. Then they see a swirl in the center of the USJ, and Izuku forms from it. Then Yui's bridal style, and she's awake and ready to do this. So she gets put down, and then they see a warp gate open in the middle of the USJ right in front of Izuku. And they're like, Izuku, is that you who's doing that? And he goes, mentally, and he goes, no. Do I have permission? And Aizawa says, if you can close that gate and keep it from opening in this entire area, yes. And Izuku goes, definitely. So he uses his quirk, and the gate closes, and it shuts, and Kurogiri is killed. The backlash from the closing of the gate from the eyes of the demon god, or Jubi, if you want to call it the Jubi, kill him. He goes boom into a fine red paste. And he goes, oops, I kind of did a little too much power on that. And Aizawa says, what do you mean a little too much? And Izuku goes, I kind of made him go boom. And Aizawa face palms and goes, you kind of, or you made him into a fine red paste? And he goes, both. And Aizawa's eyes widen, going, okay, let's get on with this. And they go on to the USJ, and the USJ goes without a hitch. And Shigaraki's like, whoever did that is cheating. They're cheating. And he's acting like the little child he is. Well, mentally at least. And Izuku, who is like, should I go visit All for One and kind of kill him, or should I have Yui do it? So he's pondering this and keeps fighting, and Yui, he keeps fighting the flames and the water zone. So he's doing everything, and he's pondering this, and he contacts Yui and says, should we tell them about your quirks? And she goes, have you told them the name of yours? And he goes, yeah. And she goes, yeah, let's tell them mine. And so Izuku goes, okay. And he tells everybody to gather up at the top of the stairs, and he'll explain the quirks of Yui's quirk. And so they get up there, and he uses his quirk and touches everybody's foreheads and says, okay, now you know the extent of her quirk. Let's continue this. And they all pale at the extent of her quirk, because he's like, I'm too lazy to explain. Let me just transfer some knowledge to them. Because the Renegon and the Rene Sharingan is able to do that. So they all pale at what Yui's quirk can do and say, okay, don't mess with Izuku. Got it. And he goes, sparring is fine as long as you don't do any major bodily harm. We've gotten to that point. As long as she doesn't see blood, she's fine. So Bakugo walks up and says, so I can do this, and sucker punches him in the gut. And Izuku coughs up spit and goes, yeah, that's fine. Oh, God. And she's wincing at this and being, she's getting pissed off, and Izuku says, I'm fine. And she sees that he's perfectly fine and calms down and goes, oh my God. And he goes, you're starting to control it. Yay! And he goes, yeah, freaking difficult though. And he goes, yeah. After you beat those kids up, you gotta control it better. She goes, I know. And everybody's like, what did he say? And All Might goes, that's enough of that, and let's go back to training. So they finish training, and it's now another heroes versus villains, but this time it's Yui versus everybody else, and Izuku has to sit out on this because Yui will not hurt him. She'll not do any physical harm to Izuku unless she blows up and loses all control of her yandere quirk. So Ooh, that's a good one. What if Famizuku had a yandere quirk? Yeah, I think that would be a good one. She'd be addicted to Bakugo. Yeah, I think that would be funny. Just make that as a joke one. Yeah. So if you guys want that, just comment or give this video 10 likes and comment, do it, or do yandere Femdeku. I've seen a few of them and I didn't like how they went. It was too serious for me. I didn't like that because yanderes are supposed to be funny. Duh. Unless they kill someone close to you, which then you gotta get pissed off. So 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 it's now the other heroes versus villains, and Yui steamrolls everybody else and goes on her day with Izuku. And I'll be right back. So later that day, everybody's in the common room and talking about Yui and Izuku. And Izuku, who learned cooking from Yui's parents and his own parents, so he was a really good cook. And Yui, who learned fighting and other stuff from beating up little kids and villains and heroes and killing heroes and villains and just doing whatever the hell she wanted to protect Izuku. Walks in, and Izuku has this giant pot in his hands, and he walks over to the stove, puts it on the stove, turns on the stove just a little bit. He says, dinner will be ready in 5 minutes, and they'll go, what? And he says, I've been cooking since I was little, and you can even ask Yui here, and she'll say that my cooking is great. And they go, that's a little biased, because she is your own personal yandere, and she looks at them and scowls, and he goes, fine, then ask Aizawa, All Might, Nezu, even the cafeteria chef, who has a cooking quirk. And they go, okay, we will. And they call up All Might, because All Might gave them his personal phone number, or if they have any questions about anybody that he could give answers about. And he says yes. And everybody goes, how's Izuku's cooking? And he goes, well, think of the demon god of him fighting and killing people. You know how that was perfect? He always killed who he needed to be, who he wanted killed. And they go, duh, it's a demon god. And he goes, think of that as cooking. He always cooked perfectly. He always got what he wanted to taste perfect. That's Izuku. And Izuku says, I'm still not that good, so shut up. And Aizawa, who heard the cooking comment, goes, his cooking is heaven, and then flops back down in his sleeping bag and rolls into his office, and the door magically shuts. And he goes, no, it's not. And then the chief chef, the cafeteria chef, walks in saying, with a big pot, saying, let's have a cooking contest. And he goes, not this again. And he goes, yes. He puts it on the stove and turns it on just a little bit and says, it'll be ready in 5 minutes. And Izuku says, mine's ready now. Everybody come get a bowl, taste mine. And then when he grabs his and gets his ready and tastes his, no, you know what? He puts it off at the burner and says, in 3 minutes, I'll warm it up again. But this time in the oven. And he puts a little bit of stuff on top, and he puts it in the oven, and he turns it on, and all of a sudden whatever was on top starts to get golden brown and melty, and he's like, did you just put cheese on the top? And he goes, not just any cheese, a special kind of goat cheese. Everybody looks at him like he's crazy, and he goes, just wait. And the chief chef from the cafeteria serves his and says, I feel like I've made the same dish as Izuku. And Izuku goes, close, but you didn't add any cheese. He goes, yeah, true. And they all taste it and be like, oh, this is heaven. And Izuku goes, and he tastes it and he goes, you're missing a few items. And he lists out the items and they check, and he tastes and he goes, damn it, you're right. And Izuku pulls out his and puts it on the stove and says, gotta wait 30 seconds. He pulls out his watch that he keeps on his left arm because he's right-handed and says, 3, 2, 1, opens it and a giant flume of scents and wonderful flavor come out and and everybody's like, if anybody's seen Food Wars, I'm going to describe a scene. So if anybody's seen the first episode of Food Wars, I suggest you go do it. This is like the bacon wrapped mashed potato. It's going to be like that scene. Whatever happened with her, whatever she felt and you saw on the screen, that's what happens with everybody else in the common room. Everybody tries Izuku's food and dies of flavor, and and Izuku just looks at them and goes, oh, come on, it's not that good. And everybody's twitching on the floor from how good it was. And he just pours out a bowl and gives it to Yui, and Yui eats it like normal, and he eats a bowl and says, well, I'm done, and walks away, and the pot's just sitting there with a ton more in it. And Yui at their house says, you sure we should have left that? And he goes, in 3, 2, 1. And the entire UA staff runs to the dorm. And he goes, definitely. So Power Loader, Vlad, Midnight, All Might, Nezu, who brought a box of tea into the home of Izuku and Yui, and with a bowl, he walks over and knocks on the door. They let him in. He comes in, starts making some tea, and says, your cooking is divine, and starts eating and drinking his tea. and it's now the start of the sports festival. And Yui is told that she can't participate in the second or third challenge. And she's like, I'm fine with that. So she takes the obstacle course seriously and transforms immediately into her demon form. And Izuku says, if you don't beat me, you don't get any fun tonight. And she starts freaking out, and once they say go, she disappears, and Izuku starts flying at full speed, because he can with his gravity manipulation, to get to the end. And she's first, he's second, but Midnight says that there's one student in this group that can't do any others because of her quirk being too destructive, and if it goes off, we can't stop her. So she has been eliminated from the roster, and Izuku Midoriya will have the 1,000,000 points. And he says, you get a reward. And she looks at him and she shivers a little because she remembers the last time he said she got a reward. So I'm going to end it here. So we just finished the obstacle course, and it's now on to the cavalry battle and the and the 1v1s. I didn't expel anybody because I'm too lazy to expel people in this one, and I'm going to probably do the summary. I'm going to call them summaries from now on, not one-shots, of what if Fem Deku was a yandere later. And I'm going to continue with no, because I finished that one. I'm going to continue with the Kenpachi one. That's going to be done. Then I'm going to... The Demon Deku is done, so I'm going to continue the Kenpachi and probably check to make sure I finished all the other ones. Then maybe start the Nergigante What If, or another one that you guys want to see. So, hopefully you guys like this. See you next time. Bye!